everyone, welcome back to my channel. As promised, I will be bringing you the story of Phibba today. So it is Black History Month, and what better time to let everyone know about the amazing Phibba. So she was an African Jamaican enslaved woman who lived about, say, from the 1730s to maybe the late 1780s, 1790s, thereabout. And she lived on the Vineyard Pen Estate near Lacovia in St. Elizabeth. No other enslaved woman's life was diarized or documented like Phibba. So it was recorded by the overseer Thomas Thistlewood, who later became a planter. A very cruel overseer. He shows acts of kindness, random acts of kindness, and he would give Phibba a lot of leeway because she became his partner, and she later bore a son for him, and he documented a lot, like every day in his diary. And of course, Phibba was a big part of the diary, and that's how we know about Phibba. So they describe her as this amazing woman. She had leadership skills. She was skilled in cooking, so they appointed her as the head cook of the great house at the Vineyard Estate. She also worked on the Egypt plantation as well as the breadnut pen plantation. So we'll get into those at a later date. But they said she was of strength and pride and courage, very intelligent. She was, from what I noticed, she was very comfortable with the Jamaican currency, and she knew how to make change. She was a skilled higgler, right? The term higgler is from England. It means to haggle. So you have a lot of higglers going out into the market. And of course, she was given the privilege to go and sell her wares. Like she would go and sell produce. She would go and sell animals, chickens, even a horse, and she would sell to other enslaved people, and they would put a down payment, and she would collect the balance in installments. This lady had her own commerce going on. She was like an entrepreneur long before they probably was using that term, right? Two assistants in the kitchen with her. One of the name was Juba. I'll tell you the other name later. So she had two assistants with her in the kitchen, and she would be cooking things like roast beef, roast pork, pigs, a lot of food, right? And she would be cooking even rice. She cooked hominy corn porridge for supper, and now, of course, in Jamaica, we mostly cook hominy corn porridge for breakfast. So she would be cooking things like dukunu. And they said fugi, which is boiled corn. Maybe that's an African term. And of course, they were picking up mushrooms on the property that the Africans call Cudjoe. We know that term as well in Jamaica. What her presence was felt on the Vineyard Estate. She would even interfere whenever other enslaved people are being reprimanded by Thomas Thistlewood. That's the courage that she had, the bravery that she had, right? And she wielded a certain amount of authority, right? She had a mind of her own, and they said she doesn't hold back to speak her mind. I mean, growing up in that type of society where there's a lot of abuse and punishment, this lady is something else to be outspoken like that, right? So she would be even riding Thomas Thistlewood horses, his mares, to go to town, Black River, produce and animals sold. No other person in his diary was given his horses like a woman would be given his horses to ride. He would even give her and maybe one other person to accompany her what they call a ticket. It's like a pass. In case she stopped on the road, she would present this to say that she has a permission to be out there on the road. So she would have lived in the time of Cudjoe, Captain Cudjoe, Captain Akongpong, Quao, and even possibly Nanny, They said Nanny passed away about in the mid 1730s. So she was maybe in her 20s. I'm just gauging her age, maybe about early 20s, when Thomas Thistlewood arrived in Jamaica to be the overseer on the Vineyard Estate. Estate was owned by Florentius Vassal, right? And he employed Thomas Thistlewood to be the overseer of the Vineyard Pen Estate. So Thistlewood arrived on the vineyard when they already have, their work schedule established, right? He was in their world type of thing, at least for a couple months, because he had to learn the ropes from them. So he arrived on July 1st, 1750, approximately 4 p.m. He journeyed from Westmoreland, that's the neighboring parish. That parish was cut out of St. Elizabeth, and they created Westmoreland from St. Elizabeth because St. Elizabeth was the biggest parish, right? So you can just imagine him coming there and everybody staring at him and him staring back at them, and him walking around the property, looking at all the buildings and the animals and, getting to know everybody and all of that. He has put in his diary like extreme abuse as well. So in one hand, he would be giving them like rum to enjoy themselves, and on the other hand, dealing out a lot of harsh punishment, right? So let's find out more about this woman named Phibba. She was of great strength, courage, intelligence. She was very comfortable with the money, the Jamaican currency. They spoke a lot about the pound, the pence, crown, shillings, and pistol and cobs of these currency way back then, right? So she would be allowed to go into the market. She would be cooking in the kitchen. She had her assistants. There was a washerwoman named Joan working on the Vineyard Pen as well. And of course, everybody else had their own jobs assigned to them. Phibba, that amazing enslaved woman who, despite the odds, rose above it and created her own little world where she strived in that world, right? I'm sure she had to go through a lot, right, of punishments and abuse and all of that, right? But she rose above it and she survived. So let's find out more about Phibba from the Vineyard Estate near Lacovia, St. Elizabeth. It is harsh on the pen, don't get me wrong, but the sugar estates would be way more harsh. On the sugar estate, you'll have hundreds, and it's more draconian and all of that. Of course, there's more highly skilled labor on the sugar plantation. Distillers and all of that would be there, right? They have some key enslaved people that they totally depend on to make sure that crop comes and they're able to see a huge profit. There were people that were highly skilled on the sugar plantation. So on the estate, on the say on Vineyard Estate, it wasn't as a highly skilled labor, right? So I'll tell you, just break it down a little bit for you as to who will be on this pen, this small estate in St. Elizabeth where Phibba is working, right? When Thistlewood, an overseer from England, came to Jamaica in 1750, of course, to seek wealth and riches, right? This is not going to focus too much on Thistlewood. It will be focusing, as I mentioned, on Phibba. So being that he's new to the island, he would be relying a lot on the enslaved people to show him the ropes, and he would be learning from them, right? First, maybe a couple of months, he would be relying on them heavily, right? So Phibba, this woman, right, probably she was about maybe 1920 when they met, because they spent years together, about 30 years or more, right? So because he came here at the age of 29 and he died when he was in his 60s. So I would say here about 30 something years, close to 40 years. So Phibba, they describe her as a woman of great reliability and dignity, right? She's a take charge person on the estate. She's the go-to person, right? So she is of utmost importance on the estate. And he came there, and of course he recognized that. So she was of great strength, pride. She had a lot of courage. She was very intelligent and skilled. She managed the whole place. Like, she was the manager in the kitchen, and she had 2 assistants. So can you imagine, this enslaved person ordering the stuff for the kitchen, making sure the supplies are top, and of course they did some agriculture to a lesser extent on the property. And as I mentioned, they cut logwood. That was for the so important dye, right? They extract the dye from the logwood. And there's a big wharf, the Farquharson Wharf in Black River. If you go back to my other video, one of my videos, 133, taken off the coast of Jamaica, you will see the Farquharson Wharf on video, right? So back to Phibba. So of course she would be from West African origin. I don't know if she was born in Jamaica. Maybe she was. I look at the records and it didn't indicate, that she was born in like an African country, right? Thinking she may have been born in the island, right? So ran basically the whole place, right? So Phibba was a woman of authority, right? And even she will even get into arguments with Thomas Thistlewood when he was reprimanding other enslaved people. She would insert herself into it. That was how fearless this lady was, right? So I am so glad that, we get to know Phibba, right? We get to know Phibba through his notes that he made in his diaries. So skilled labor on a bigger plantation would be wheelwrights, boilers, distillers, carpenters, coopers. We'll be selling things like pigs, corn, peas, avocado, yam, twisted tobacco, and all of that will be sold in the Sunday market. So the Sunday was used to do selling and to wash themselves and to clean their cabins and maybe mend their clothes. And also, of course, they would go out. Some of them will go out into the markets as well. Later on, when they introduced church, then they would be going to church on Sunday. So, and a lot of them still spoke their African language, and we didn't have probably the modern patois as yet. So Thomas Thistlewood set out from Westmoreland on July 1st at dawn. So he got this new job at the Vineyard Pen Estate, of course, near Lacovia, St. Elizabeth, right? And he was journeying there by horse. So one of the first persons he met in Westmoreland, by the way, was Cudjoe, Captain Cudjoe. So Phibba would have known about Cudjoe because Cudjoe visited the estates. Those estates, they were always, around. So she would have seen Cudjoe. She would have probably heard about Akongpong. She would have probably most likely was born when Nanny was still alive. I'm not sure if she would have known Nanny, but she would have known Cudjoe for sure because he came to that plantation. So she would be telling them how much beef she would need, how much pork, what is needed to be slaughtered, what should be given to the enslaved people, and all of that. She was kind of running the business under Thomas Thistlewood, so to speak, right? So she would be giving out clothes as well to the enslaved people. She sold her wares and produce, any excess produce that they had from their gardens, they would sell it in the market. So they'll be selling peas, pumpkin, potatoes, edos, corn, stuff like that. And of course, he documented that went out on April 17, 1751, with another enslaved person named Scipio as an escort. And he documented that she sold 58 yards of garlics, so it's a fabric, and 9 yards of a crossbar at 7 beads. So they also use beads as currency, right? And also 44 yards of check. So maybe check plaid type of thing, right? And at 5 beads a yard. So he documented how much money she brought home. So she brought home 689 beads, or 21 pounds 10 shillings and 7 pence and half a penny in Jamaican currency, right? He even gave her a note that they call a ticket on June the 5th to leave Vineyard Pen Estate and go to sell in the market as well. And they listed her owner as Florentius Vassal, Esquire. So she was a force to reckon with on the plantation. Thomas pursued her, and of course she kept rebutting him, right? He wrote that in his diary, it was not an easy conquest. Thomas Thistlewood himself was involved in a lot of things on the property that he has documented, and it has now become a historical book, right? Because he detailed almost everyday acts, aggression, punishment, and he was very brutal at times towards the enslaved people who lived on that property. So a lot of atrocities also happened on the Vineyard Pen Estate. He would even put the head of an enslaved person on the post outside at one point to warn the other enslaved people what he is capable of. When Phibba was alive, she would have seen the breadfruit being introduced in 1776 because she was still alive at that point. Thomas Thistlewood passed away around 1786 and she was still alive. Nothing else was written about her after he passed away. Pen Estate now has modern homes. It has an early childhood center, close-knit community. It looks very clean, and as you can see, there's a main road going into the community, and that is not something that is in every community. You don't see it. You can see the way the community is laid out. You have this road running right through the community and land on either side. So that tells me it's organized. Everything was deliberate. They made sure they had a proper road going right through the estate. And of course, there's land on either side. So you can just imagine Phibba walking up this road. It was not, of course, asphalt or anything like that. Probably a dirt road, walking with a basket or riding with a basket. They mainly did cattle, right? So cattle was a big thing on the flats, on the grasslands of St. Elizabeth, right? So you had a lot of cattle being raised in a lot of estates. So they would raise goats, pigs, horses were there, and cows. That was a big thing. They also did logwood. So they would be putting the logwood on canoes because there is some river or some type of morass water at the back of the premises where they could the logwood to Black River, and most likely they were going to the Farquharson Wharf, right? So that would be for export, where they extract the indigo for the use of dye, which they used to dye cloth back in the day. It was very lucrative, very expensive. So today you could still see cows on that property, right? And it is close to Arlington and Burn Savannah district. So you'll see a nice mountain view backdrop, so beautiful. I think it's the Santa Cruz Mountains and maybe possible Mount Olivet. So they had this beautiful scenery in that property as well. So today they're still doing sweet peppercorn. Tomatoes have been introduced now. Pumpkins are there. So, and a lot of crops that they used to do back then, they're doing it now. So as I mentioned, Thomas Thistlewood arrived July 1st, 1750. So the height of the summer. he wrote in his diary, right, that October 1753, he, of course, started a quote-unquote relationship with Phibba. He never fully conquered her, or she never became a conquest, like in her heart, like opened her heart. Maybe, you know, he managed to have like a physical relationship with her, but she never really opened her heart to him until February 1754, completely yielded, he wrote in his diary. Please remember to like, share, and subscribe. Take care of yourself and others. Bye for now. See you on the next video.